Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Flynn. I'm the author of a couple of novels, Tiger in Eden and The Glass Kingdom, that just came out recently. Yay for me. But tonight is not about me. Our guest tonight is the author of almost an indeterminate number of books. I'm going to say 17, unless he corrects me. Is it 17 books?
I might say 19.
19?
Yeah.
He's written a few since I actually wrote this. Two of which, Perfect Skin and 48 Shades of Brown, have been adapted into feature films. Another 5 of which have been adapted for the stage. Now, in his 20-plus year career, he has been variously compared to Raymond Carver, Nick Hornby, and Jeffrey Eugenides. Although it's the comparisons to J.D. Salinger and Woody Allen that ring truest for me personally. He was born, as I was, it's a bit easier like without these up. He was born as I was in Northern Ireland, and he left there in 1972 when he was 8 years old, which was just a few months after I was born.
But who's counting?
He was not an 8-year-old father running away, don't worry.
This is a reunion. It's very special to me.
You're not my father. I'll never rule the universe with you. In 2012, he made the Age's top 10 greatest living Australians. And last year, he placed 12th in a poll of Australia's all-time favourite novelists. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true honour for me to present my absolute number one favourite Australian novelist. I'm so happy to be on stage with him. Please give a big warm welcome to Nick Earls.
Thank you. And thank you.
So, Nick, it's book 17 or 19 or whatever it is, and they just seem to keep getting better. Do you feel that?
I hope that. I hope I learn a bit as I go along, and I think for me with this book, years ago in the late 90s and early 2000s, the books that turned writing into a career for me were comedies about men in their 20s and 30s, and I had a good solid go at that and squeezed every drop out of that, I felt at the time. And after that, I needed to try some different things to keep my own interest as much as anything. And but along the way, people said, "Are you ever going to write that kind of thing again?" And I'd say the kind of standard answer, which I wasn't necessarily honest about at the time, was I'd say yes when the idea for the right story comes along, because that seems to cover that. And I wasn't expecting it to come along.
Right.
But then I realised a few years ago that I'd done 20-something, I'd done 30-something, and there I was 40-something by then, and here was a decade that I hadn't done yet. And then I saw how 40-something was playing out this century, and 40-something in an era of abundant technology, rapid change, and challenging teenage children suddenly looked to me like fertile ground for a kind of slightly older version of what I'd done those years before. And what I wanted to do was take some of the things that I'd learned when writing those books and some of the things that I've learned reading books and writing since then about how to write, and see if I could apply all that to the one story and one set of characters. And then I needed to come up with the people and the story. Yeah,
right. I mean, do you feel like because you have covered quite a lot of ground in your career in the various books that you've done, do you still? I mean, it's kind of amazing that you've done so many books in this day and age, because there's not too many authors who kind of last the distance anymore. It feels to me like a lot of authors might write, 4 or 5 books and then that's it, or 2 or 3 books, or even 1 book and then they're done. Mm. But you've written 19 now. Do you still feel that challenge each time of like, okay, I've got something new here? There's obviously something still driving you to keep doing them.
There is, and I wouldn't have expected that it would feel the way it does now. If someone had asked me when I'd been writing my first or second or third books, how do you think you'll feel when you're writing book 19, I don't know what I would have told them, but what I would have honestly thought is that I should be on top of my game then, and it would feel a bit like a production line and be a bit less exciting. But what I've learned is that each novel starts as a puzzle I don't know how to solve yet, and I love solving that puzzle. And I think I approach each book in some ways as though it's my first, because I don't know how to write that book yet. And I want to bring some of the excitement and desperation you have when writing your first book to each one. And I also approach each one as though it could be my last, because you don't know when that's going to happen. And so that's a clear indication to everyone here that really, if you don't buy my book tonight, my career might be over. My publisher is in the room tonight monitoring you as an audience, and if I don't sell to at least 40% of you, I think it's over. And by the way, Chris's books are here as well, so you can help two authors in one tonight, and both our books make great gifts, so everybody wins.
I feel that quite strongly with your books, though, because I guess a lot of my favourite authors that I've read over the years, I've kind of lost interest in them a bit more as their careers have gone on. But with you, there seems to be this rejuvenation constantly with your work, and it's actually your last few books that I have liked the most. And it does feel like you're still, exploring in your books.
Exactly, yeah. I am, and partly that's fear of obsolescence, but partly it's also the actual excitement of realizing I don't know everything and I can learn more. And I go to writers' festivals in various places and end up on panels with various people and hear people read and think, how does he or how does she do that? I want to read that book. I want to work that thing out. I want to see if I can do a version of that too. So I want to keep getting better if I can. And I look at writers like David Malouf and Tom Keneally, who are respectively 80 and 77, and they're still turning out great work. And I think if I can hold on to readers and still be doing that in a few decades' time, I'll want to still be doing that. I don't want to stop.
Let's talk about the most recent book then, Analog Men. I could read the blurb for it, but sometimes they can be a little bit sort of misleading. Can you tell us basically what Analog Men is about?
Yes, I wrote the blurb for it, so it's spot on.
It's got a terrible blurb, but can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, I forgot that I wrote the blurb. I sent, because middle of last year, I think even before I'd submitted the novel, my publisher, I don't mean to talk about you all the time, but it's just how it's coming up. And we haven't even talked about pubic hair yet. That's an editing reference, by the way. It's all fine.
Okay.
It's all above board. So Meredith asked me to give some idea of what the book was about. I'm not sure what it was for. So I wrote this little thing and I thought, hey, wow, this takes me back to my days in advertising. That's kind of punchy. So I emailed it to her and then didn't think of it again. And then when the book was being typeset, I think I saw the blurb and I read the blurb and I thought, that's great. I like that blurb. And then I thought there's a couple of lines slightly familiar. So I just took a phrase from it and searched on my laptop and found the whole thing. And I thought, memory of a goldfish. This is just one lap of the fishbowl, and I'm being surprised by my own castle. But okay, so what it's about, without resorting to the blurb, is central character is a guy called Andrew Van Fleet. He's 49. He's been working in private equity. It's taken him away from home for much of the last 3 years, and his two twins are now 15, and he's realised that they don't have much childhood left. He's drifted away from them and from his partner and his father, who's not well, and this is his chance to change that. So he's leaving private equity. He's moving back to a job in Brisbane to reconnect with his family. And this is the first 4 days of his new life, from the moment he sees them for the first time on a Wednesday morning to the following Saturday night when he turns up back in Brisbane. Here he is trying to reconnect with his family, who've worked out how to lead lives without him. He's trying to work out how to do a new job that he's not really trained to do. He's stumbling around with technology the way it turns out a lot of us do. It's been very validating for my own stumbling with technology, putting this book out and have so many people reveal that they're actually more crap than I am. So that's been good. And I realised if I sent him to work in a radio station, I could then come up with a fairly appalling radio jock who could actually bring to life some of the most crass thoughts that had occurred to me over the last 5 years, and I could have a lot of fun with that as well. So I realised I had a troop of people I wanted to work with, and that I could send him back into a life that he's trying to make sense of, and then I could scramble it up in as many ways as I possibly could to make that hard for him.
Can you introduce us to Andrew through the first little reading?
I can.
Page 12, I think. Right
so yes, so this is how Andrew feels about himself. He runs daily in order to keep in reasonable shape, but he consistently, I think, like many of us, eats slightly more calories than he manages to burn off, and it's starting to show. And his partner is Robin. She's a GP and not particularly charitable. And this is what he sees when he's had his shower that morning after his run. I'm not fat, but I'm pushing a thin man's clothes to the limit. For a while I've been belting up to the last hole, starting to muffin top. There's only so many months you can tell yourself it's gas and still believe it. I have borderline irritable bowel syndrome, in the part of the spectrum that Robin classifies as being human and not an actual disease. Some days I'm a gas ball, but on no days now could I call myself lean. On my better days, I can convince myself that I am the standard 49-year-old sack of shop-worn but mostly serviceable parts. I am weeks away from my first colonoscopy and months from one of Robin's workmates slipping his or her index finger into my rectum for the first time. I have broken teeth on something as lame as breakfast cereal. I have torn my calf muscle running in a manner colloquially known as the old man's injury. I have had 3 conversations already about what glucosamine can offer the weight-bearing joints. I am mostly somewhere on the life spectrum between wear and tear, though tear finds me when it wants to, and more often than it once did. Even my earlobes have their first hint of wrinkles, and I can see no reason for earlobes to age at all. I was born in the Menzies years, in John F. Kennedy's final weeks. Warships my age are now dive wrecks. I have been alive for all 11 incarnations of Doctor Who. I am doing my best. I can see more scalp through my hair than I once could. Under bright lights, it's almost as if there's an X-ray outline of my skull. If I turn side on, the picture only gets worse. My lifelong round-shouldered slump looks more like a question mark, and now one with a broader base. The kind of question mark that would rock back into place if you tipped it over. In my 20s, I went through blood tests and x-rays for ankylosing spondylitis. My back is stiff as well as hunchy. Despite semi-regular attempts at yoga, my muscles are permanently taut, as if stuck in a thankless state of vigilance, like those Japanese soldiers left behind in the jungles of the Pacific decades after the war. None of this, according to Robin, amounts to an actual disease. I am simply less well constructed than average for vertical life. My body is more like a pale, hairy barrel with the arms of a different model hung on the sides. I have the arms I used to see behind post office counters when I was young, and they hung out of the short shirt sleeves of old men who I assumed had been born behind that same counter and would one day die there. Perhaps I'm just entering my Wagyu years, face down in the feed trough, muscles silently marbling. I used to panic about being seen naked. Now I don't even shut the hotel curtains. I'm no more inclined to display myself, but I'm invisible. I've gone from a scrawniness I'd grown accustomed to a broader, deeper, run-of-the-mill, middle-aged unattractiveness that the world simply doesn't see. All those billions being spent by the military-industrial complex to develop a suit of invisibility, and all they really need to do is dress every soldier up as a flabby white guy pushing 50. Thanks.
So I'm 42. Is this what I'm looking at in 7 years' time?
I've written this deliberately as a shot across your bows. So I'm expecting you to do much better than this in 7 years' time because you've read this. This is a manual on how the 40s should not be lived. So you'll be a prime specimen, I'm sure.
But you would have been about 49 when you wrote that, right?
I was. It was the last literary rush of my 40s. So I thought this would be great. I can write my ultimate statement about 49 while I'm 49, and then kind of creakily tour my way around the country when I'm 50 talking about it, reminiscing fondly about that now spent decade.
The 40s.
The 40s. Yeah.
So do you feel any of what he feels at all? I mean, I hate it whenever people just assume that their main characters is a thinly veiled version of the author, but is there anything of you in there at all?
In that bit I just read, look, there's not more than 90% of that would be me. I'm not married to someone called Robin. That's it. Look, the rest of it, God, yeah. I'm afraid this book is fiction, but geez, yeah. When I take down a 49-year-old guy in this book, it is usually me, unfortunately. Yeah. So I was running one day. This was a few years ago. I was running on my daily run, and I'd stopped to cross a road, and then I got a chance to go, but I had to sprint. So I went to sprint, and as I pushed off, it was like I got hit in the calf by a cricket ball. It was really sore, and I turned around, and there was nothing there, and I thought, what's that? And I realized I couldn't walk, and I had to hop home, and I realized I'd torn my gastrocnemius muscle just pushing off to run. I thought, that's not impressive. So I went home and I strapped it and I iced it, and I started to think, what should I do to manage this properly? And I turned on the news and I saw that James Hird had done the same thing that very same day. So I said to myself, it's cool if James Hird does it on the same day. You're not old and falling apart because James Hird does it and he's in his 30s, it's okay. And at the end of the story on James Hird doing it, they said that injury was colloquially referred to as the old man's injury. I thought, could you not have just edited that last bit and left me with James Hird? So I have had the old man's injury.
I thought you were going to say, and at the end of the news report they said, also Nick Earls.
Yes. In other gastrocnemius news, we crossed a Toowong in Brisbane, and there I am hobbling across the road, being laughed at by passers-by. Yeah, fortunately that did not happen.
You can totally tell that you are a medical doctor because you gastric what?
Gastrocnemius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it took me 2 years to learn how to say that, so I'm not stopping now.
Yeah. So tell us about the other main character then, shock jock, I suppose he is of a sort, Brian Brightman.
Brian Brightman was an opportunity to have someone from outside the family who could play a wild card at regular intervals in this story. And what I wanted was to have him, and I thought Brian's the same age. They're both 49, and they've lived in the same city, but they find themselves, and they're both sort of facing obsolescence, but they're facing it in very different ways. And what I wanted was for Brian to look like a kind of stereotypical ratty shock jockey kind of radio guy, but in fact there's a smarter Brian underneath that, and we see more of that later on. But when I realised I was going to set this in a radio station and realised I needed a character like Brian, a surprising number of really awful, crass things occurred to me over the following years, and I just think I can't say that in public, I can't tweet that, I can't put that on. I can give it to Brian though.
So you kind of missed your calling as a sort of Kyle Sandilands type character.
Well, maybe this will give me a chance. Maybe even if the novel tanks, maybe radio will notice this and will think he's potentially good talent. Could you just gain some weight and get slightly hairier and come and bring that over here, please? Sure. No one's ever said that to me before.
Is he your little dig at those sort of Kyle Sandilands type characters who have been a lot in the media in the last couple of years?
They have been a lot in the media, and they were a lot in the media at the time, and it was too tempting a character not to use. But what I wanted to do, I guess, was look as though he was going to be just that, but then use him as an agent to reveal a little more story and also throw in a few things we aren't expecting right until the end.
Yeah. It seems like both men have missed out on quite a lot in their lives. I mean, Andrew's very alienated from his family. He sort of almost forgot he had a family for a little while.
Yes.
And Brian's even more so. He's got that sort of sad photograph of his son on his desk and hasn't spoke to him for ages. Is it because just work just took precedence for them and they just forgot about the fact that they had family? I think it's work with Andrew, because his intention with the previous job was that he was working for private equity. He was working out of the Sydney office, but the intention was to set up a Brisbane office that he would be the managing director of. But the financial crisis came along and stopped that happening, and he's just kind of been holding on since then. So his intention was always to get back to Brisbane. And I think with Brian probably got swept up in the radio career, loved the sound of his own voice, loved all of that, made a mess of various relationships, and wasn't allowed back in. And as he says in the novel, really only, as he says, some of his best
phone calls with his ex-wife have been the thing he refers to as gut calls, when the ampleness of his abdomen actually triggers his phone to make a call. And so he's made a mess of things in a slightly different way, and things are worse. But it's a kind of warning for Andrew, really, when he sees that.
Yeah.
And he sees someone the same age as him who's botched it and doesn't even have the possibility of having an up-to-date photo of his 19-year-old or 20-year-old, because he's trying to remember which, on his desk. So, and he wants that to be better for Brian, but he really doesn't want to get in that position himself.
And it's not only the fact that they've been concentrating on their work and their career that has stopped them from connecting with their family, but the world itself has sort of moved on around them. I mean, Andrew's a real Luddite with technology, and but interestingly, his son you might expect to be adept with technology because he's 15, but his father's really good with it as well.
Yes, his father's good with it as well, and he's that in-between generation, which is what I am in my family. My father's PhD is in IT, and he's 80 now, but he did that in his late 50s, and he's still working, and he is involved with internet domain registries around the world.
You said that so hesitantly.
Yes, so as not to put the words in the wrong order in case Dad ever watches this, because I at least want to get that right. So he travels around. He's been involved in the shift between Internet Protocol version 5 and Internet Protocol version 6, which is a thing of which I have a very limited understanding, but my dad did bring me the T-shirt home. So so I've got this thing on it that says IPv6, don't miss the boat. And most people go, what is that T-shirt about? But then there was a little cartoony thing above it, and a friend of ours who is actually a rocket scientist, he's got a PhD in rocket science, saw me in the shirt one day and went, okay, I get the IPv6 thing, but what's that? I just don't. That's, everyone else goes, what is IPv6? So that's my dad, and then I've got my son who is now 4.5, and we got him a tablet computer when he was 2,
really?
And he was just starting to talk then, and then a few months later I was reading him a book, and he pointed to a letter P and said P, and he pointed to an M and said M, and I said, how did you learn that? And he went and got his tablet and showed me the app that he'd got on there that he'd used to teach himself the entire alphabet, and which made me massively impressed with him, but made me feel kind of negligent as a parent. I thought I'd be teaching him the alphabet, but so he did that, and now he just thinks that YouTube is access to everything in the world, and he is the kind of digital native of the family, really into dinosaurs at the moment. So his favourite thing is to pick 2 dinosaurs out of the blue and find a YouTube video of the 2 of them fighting to the death. Because what 4-year-old doesn't love that?
Absolutely.
And he's supposed to do a show and tell presentation at childcare each week, and they're not allowed to take toys. And he reasoned with me that it would be okay if he took one of his dinosaur toys if he dealt with the science, not with the toy aspect of it. So then we had to find out about that, and then we found on the BBC Walking with Dinosaur site, you can get a fact sheet on each dinosaur that, among other things, tells you how big the dinosaurs' poos were and things like that. And some of them, Diplodocus, it ate 3 tons of leaves a day. Don't stand near the back end because you've got a ton of moist stuff coming out at you at the wrong time. So why would you not love the internet if you were 4 or 5 and it offered you that?
Yeah, and I guess in the book, because you've got Andrew's dad and his son, they're both very au fait. His father's constantly pulling out the iPad, pulling up videos of songs that he wants the teenagers to listen to.
Yes.
Because they're quite interested in discovering music. But Andrew's in the middle, sort of left out of all this.
Yes, and feeling left out of all this because his own father has found a great way to connect with the kids. And there's a time when they're watching a Bee Gees video on something that someone's recorded somewhere, and he never gets to the bottom of that. But then his father's the expert again, because his father was a big star in Brisbane radio in the 70s and interviewed Barry Gibb 3 times. And so his father can cover all that, and then talks about the development of videos in the 80s. And Andrew's there in the kitchen unpacking the groceries that he's bought, having bought groceries for the first time in 2 years, trying to work out where things go, thinking, I should be the expert on videos in the 80s. And yes, so I sometimes feel like that's slightly in my own family. And during the course of planning the novel, I did actually upgrade from an older phone to my first smartphone. I've been working on this for a while, so it was a few years ago, and only to find it outsmarting me regularly, of course. And there are still loads of apps on there that I don't understand at all. I only discovered today that there's one called Rescue, and I'm not going to press that just in case it initiates one. So sometime if I'm lost in the wilderness, that's when I get to work out what the Rescue app does or doesn't do. And if it turns out to be really lame, then I'm stuck in the wilderness. But
I think a helicopter comes.
A helicopter. I'm hoping a helicopter comes. I'm thinking it can't just happen with one press. But shall I get my phone and we'll try it? No, if we hear helicopter. No. So I'm not going to do that tonight. But so for the first, I got my phone. I got my smartphone. And then coincidentally, the next day when I was walking around, my hip started clicking. And I thought, it's another one of those injuries, because there's been a few of them. And so I started to get a bit preoccupied with this hip injury. And I developed what orthopaedic surgeons know as an antalgic gait, a gait designed to minimise pain. I didn't have pain, I just had a clicking hip, I thought. So I had this gait that was there to minimise the problem with my hip, and it kept clicking. This must be getting worse, because I'm trying to guard the hip and it's still clicking. And after 3 days of this, by complete coincidence, I found the 300 photos of the inside of my pocket that the phone had taken. And then once I learned how to turn off my phone before putting it in my pocket, the hip clicking went away. So I'm really glad I worked that out before the physio appointment and got to cancel.
Is it because you and Andrew are both representative of this generation that was sort of born in this transitional period where, the internet began, whenever you were maybe a little bit older than, most people might have, been to appreciate that.
Older. And I'd just be cranking up the car to get it started. And the youngsters were discovering the internet. Okay, what happened in my family was a strange version of that. So in my family, the first computer arrived at our house in the early 1980s. And Dad got an Apple IIe in 1983 when it was new. We got a Macintosh the next year when it was new and cost more than computers cost now. And in 1983, when my father was doing a master's, he led me downstairs to his office under the house, and he clamped a massive machine onto the phone, and you could hear the kind of whistles and beeps of a sound going to deep space and back. And he said, "This is email." And we sat there, and this line of green text started to glow on the screen. And he said, "That's called an email, and it's been sent to me from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. One day we'll all be doing this." And I just thought, you mad old bastard. I don't even know those people in Pittsburgh. So, of course, turned out Dad was right. So for me, in the mid-'80s, email was just a wacky hobby of my dad's, and I didn't think that I needed to engage with that at all. So I resisted it, and then spent the 90s, if I'm to be honest, writing my novels on second-hand Apple computers given to me by my dad. So, yes. So I had the technology. I just didn't realise that it was going to be all pervasive. I don't think he did at the time, but, We're
going to go into this in a little bit more detail later. I'm going to take Nick back through all of his books, and he'll be able to explain the advance of technology, because he's one of those unusual authors who's had a career that has spanned, not the Stone Age, but...
from when I started out with that pointed stick and that clay tablet, and now, yes...
cave paintings and so on.
Yes.
But he's...
that thing with the blowing... he's good at that.
But in terms of technology, because Brian is also in a world radio, which is maybe a little bit out of step with technology, or is he? Because he does actually know about Pandora and all of the streaming services. He's terrified of them in a way, I guess.
Yes.
Can we have a little audience poll maybe? Who actually listens to the radio on a regular basis?
And who, put your hand down if you only listen to it when you're in your car. Yeah, do you only listen? Hand down if you only listen to it in the car. Hand up if you listen to radio recreationally when you're not in your car. Okay. And now the car people back again? Yeah, so that's more. Yeah, okay.
That's quite a lot of people, though.
Yeah.
I mean, but how do you listen to the radio? Do you listen to it on a radio, or do you listen to it? That sounds like a silly question. But would you listen to it on your computer while you're sitting at your desk? A lot of people listen to it on their computer. Oh, a few.
Anyone listen to it in a wireless in a walnut box? That's how it should be done.
It takes half an hour for it to warm up.
Yes.
So there is quite a lot of people who still listen to the radio, but can you maybe tell us a little bit about why radio is a bit of a sort of dangerous area for them to be going into?
Yes, I was thinking when I was starting to plan this novel, publishing was going through a lot of changes. Publishing still is.
Yeah.
Publishing is going through probably its biggest shift since the second half of the 15th century. And I hope to survive a little longer in that, despite the turbulence. And I wanted to pick an industry that was like that, but I thought it could look rather uninteresting having an author writing about a publishing company.
Happens all the time.
Yeah,
authors writing about other authors.
Yeah. So I try to limit the number of times. I try to make sure that it's no more than one piece in 20 that I write involves an author as a character or something like that. So I thought I got to pick something else, and round about that time, ABC Radio in Brisbane, local radio, asked me if I would do some sessions on air, if I'd relieve a presenter while they were away.
Okay.
So I did that, and then I hosted Summer Drive, and so I spent a month on air to kind of get a grasp of the inner workings of the radio station. So when they asked me to do that, I thought I'm going to pick radio, and then I looked into radio, and I think radio is in a really interesting state. So some radio is going to hold on to the listeners that it's had for a long time for the rest of their days. But how is radio going to come up with new listeners?
Right.
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think some formats in radio have different futures from other formats in radio. So, for example, if you are ABC local radio or a community station that connects really strongly with your community and people want to listen to the stories you're covering and get information from you and all that, I think that's a valid service that can keep existing however it's delivered,
right.
And we're going to call that radio because it's auditory. I think it's music radio that's in a different position, and that's where we look at things like Pandora Internet Radio, which must have close to 100 million subscribers now. For anyone who doesn't know how that works, you subscribe, you pay very little to subscribe. Musicians make very little when your songs are played there. And how it works is you start listening to it through whatever device you choose, and you respond to the songs that... There are various ways it works, but one of them is that you respond to the songs that you listen to, and you make it clear which ones you like and
so
which
you like them. Yeah.
You like them or you don't like them. And you can express both of those. And so then there's an algorithm that they've got that responds to that to then change the programming for you so you get more and more songs that you like, whether you've heard them before or not. So what it does is it builds a unique radio station for each one of its almost 100 million subscribers. And how does music radio compete with that?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting development.
Because the problem with music radio, right, is that you're listening to it, you're enjoying a few songs, and then a song that you absolutely hate comes on.
Yes.
And you just want to turn the radio off.
And you want to turn the radio off. You want to play a CD or play some
a what?
Yeah, I was going to get there. Going to explain that was a format that came in when you were a child that might have had its day now, but some elderly folks still like to go to JB Hi-Fi and pick up the odd disc. And so, your MP3 player, there's probably a newer version of that now as well. You're looking at me thinking, I vaguely remember MP3s back before I had access to the cloud and whatever young person's music.
Oh yeah, I listen to SoundCloud.
Yeah.
SoundCloud,
yeah.
which is
yes.
Sort of, yeah.
One of those
things.
Yeah. I knew he would. I knew it. I'm just being put up here to look redundant.
Let's have another reading. Give us a little bit of Brian's Q&A so we can get a bit of a feel for Brian, which is
yes.
Page 198.
Yes. So this is one of the things that people in the media have to do quite a bit is, you do interviews in other media, and you authors have to do this too. I bet you've done some Q&As, and I get to do some Q&As, and the Q&As, you get emailed the questions, and it's the standard questions each time, and the people who ask them love the standard questions, and they can be things like, what's your favourite word? I'm thinking, favourite word. It takes me, in the case of this, takes me 93,000 words to get the job done. I can't possibly have a favourite word. It just, the concept does my head in. And then there's, your fantasy dinner party and things like that. What 6 people would you invite to dinner?
Yeah.
And how do you handle that? Do you play it for laughs, or do you try for world peace? Do you want to go, I want Jesus, I want Muhammad at my dinner, I want them to get on, and I want everything to just really be cool after that. It's, oh God, it's such,
Or you want to feel like you're a kind of a smart arse, so you'll say all the big literary names so that you can reference that. Someone asked me which literary character I'd like to meet, and I was totally flummoxed, and I said, the Hulk.
Yes, good. That is what that deserves. That's exactly the kind of thing.
But I actually would quite like to meet, Dr. Bruce Banner,
Dr.
obviously.
Bruce Banner, I think, rather than the Hulk.
Maybe not the Hulk himself.
Yes, as he shreds his clothes in front. Don't piss him off, okay? Because he can get a little green.
You wouldn't like him when he's angry, yeah?
No. So among those things, one of the ones that you get regularly is Celebrity Crush. And in Celebrity Crush is a trap for the middle-aged male player. And this is how that one can go. So Andrew's turned up to the radio station. He's been given by a publicist Brian's draft responses to a Q&A for a website, and there are some issues that he needs to discuss. They adjourn to the tea room, and as Brian goes to make the coffee, Andrew gets ready to talk to him. Jesus, you've got notes this time, Brian says in the tea room when I pull the 2 pages from my pocket. He hands me my coffee, and I set it down on the table and pull out a chair. It's the Urban List Q&A. Oh, yeah. It's as non-committal as he can make it. He's got his back to me while he loads a new capsule and presses the button. The machine vibrates and hums loudly. Far away. He's still got his back to me. Matadors turn their backs on bulls to tell the bulls they aren't of much consequence. Nothing to fear. I heard that on holiday in Spain. Okay. I wait till the machine stops so I don't have to shout. That's another thing I heard once. The first person to shout loses. The coffee machine clunks into silence. Celebrity Crush, Taylor Swift. Do you really think that's a good idea? He swirls the spoon around loosely in his coffee and cackles to himself. He drops the spoon in the sink, pulls at his belt, and drags the chair opposite me out from the table. Once he's sitting on it, he says, I don't think it'd be a bad idea. A really good idea would be Taylor Swift doing this Q&A and putting Brian Brightman. He nods slowly and smiles, giving the fantasy a second or two of flight. I wasn't serious picking her. If I'd been serious, I would have gone for someone much bigger up top. You're not even supposed to be looking at those parts of Taylor Swift. Already he's sucked me into debating the moral fine print. How about we go with this? If you're old enough to have fathered them, they're not on your list. She's legal? It's the kind of argument my son would raise. Brian has a teenager's eye for detail and grasp of consequences. She's like 20, way legal. I think you're missing the point here. Points, I have several. To start with, at the level of highest ick factor, you say that legal thing as if she might have sex with you. Repeat this over and over in your head. To Taylor Swift, I am just a creepy old man. He raises his eyebrows and contemplates it. He goes to sip coffee, but the sip becomes a slurp. A drop falls from his chin and splashes onto his thigh. He doesn't seem to mind. I kind of like the idea that she's thinking about me, he says, even if I'm creeping her out a bit. I reckon I could talk her around on a good day. He leans back in his chair. Somehow I've sent another blast of wind beneath the wings of the fantasy. He sniffs and lets his smug smile settle a little. What about Hermione from Harry Potter? You got to admit she's pretty bloody stunning, and she's 22. But she started being Hermione when she was about 10. It's even more wrong bringing up the fact that she played Hermione. She's 22 now. Still way too young for you. Just for a second, please, try to get it. I'm attempting to stop you putting out material that could reasonably depict you as a pervy old man. Oh, right. He takes it on board as if it's a new idea, one that might be due some deliberation. You realise that through this job, I actually have a shot at meeting Taylor Swift, so it's bait. It's good bait, but I'm determined not to take it. He trails it around in the water for a while. While an interview is unlikely but not out of the question, no set of circumstances available on this planet in this epoch could see him dating Taylor Swift. So who do you think I should pick then? He says, giving in to my fish-eyed stare. Virginia Woolf? I can't help but laugh. You could do a lot worse than Virginia Woolf, and don't go dropping her if you find out she wasn't stacked. Oh, she had a nose on her, but, I've got to accept I'm looking for a bit of latitude from her too. He rocks back in his chair and angles his hands to frame the broad, hairy abdomen bursting through his shirt buttons and the complex stains on his pants. What about Tina Fey? She's over 40. His chair clunks forward again and his abdomen bumps the table. Coffee sloshes around in his cup. You can have Tina Fey, and why wouldn't you? Finally, a living celeb we can agree on. He smirks. I'm on some kind of hook after all. Your wife looks like Tina Fey. You can no longer have Tina Fey. And that ended up in there because I've had that celebrity crush question, and you think, okay, there's like, this could be potentially trouble because this is going out to lots of people. So I thought, here's how you handle that. You pick someone who is age appropriate and not in Australia, because sometimes you bump into people and you don't want them, it could be awkward. Then one time I wrote a book with another friend. I rarely co-author books. I wrote a book with a friend called Rebecca Sparrow, and that came out in 2006. And we were doing the tour together, so we were often doing interviews together. And people were separating us and asking questions. It was like a green card interview to see if our answers matched up. And so they went, who's Beck's big celebrity crush? And I thought, okay, play it safe. Play it by the rules, age appropriate and in another country. And Beck has a thing about the 80s. So I said, Kirk Cameron from Growing Pains, going, yeah, she's going to go for that. She can riff with that and that'll be good. So then she did, and that was great. And then they went to her, and who's Nick's celebrity crush? And she went, this was the Sunday Mail in Brisbane, and she went, Patience Hodgson from The Greats. And I went, no, that is like massively wrong. You've done that in a Brisbane interview in a really high circulation newspaper, and she's 20, and this is and it ran, and I thought, this is so embarrassing. And then I just thought, do nothing, it'll go away. Other than so, and then this interviewer said to me, what about that? Is she your celebrity crush? I went, no, I wouldn't. She's very cool. I just might have said that I thought she was real, blah 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 blah, looking like a creepy old man. Shut up, and hoping the moment would go away. Then much more recently, I was invited to go into ABC Radio and be part of a panel, and the presenter, someone I know well who had produced me on radio, who knows about some of my life gaffes, went, and one of the panellists tonight is Patience Hodgson from The Greats. And, no, I wonder if she knows. And of course the presenter knew. So then she introduced me, and she said, actually, I believe Nick and Patience have a past. And I was going, what are you doing here? That Nick named you as a celebrity crush. I said, no, I didn't name her as a celebrity crush. So there we were. And then she was like right next to me. And I do think she's very cool and impressive. And not in a crush way, in a respectable. She's well into her 20s. Anyway, but then she totally saved it. She totally saved it and saved me by saying that not only did she know about that at the time, but like loads of people pointed it out to her, but shortly before that article was published in the Courier Mail, she'd been dumped by her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was a big fan of mine. And so there I was, outed as having this crush on her, and she thought, he's on my team. I win this one. So she's totally fine with it.
And how is the relationship now?
I've never seen her since. We follow each other on Twitter, and she keeps saying, come to the Southside Tea Rooms, which she runs, and I can't face her again. But, I'm thinking, quit while I'm ahead.
It's nearly 7 o'clock, so we're going to move on to the bit of fun that we decided to have, which was to look back over Nick's career and to run through the books and see how you actually wrote them. This is about the passing of technology. So your first unpublished novel was 1978.
It was.
And what did you write that on?
I wrote that by hand and on a series of loose sheets of paper, and then my mother typed it. My mother typed it and did 2 carbon copies, just in case I worked out where you might send them.
Using carbon paper?
Using carbon paper, yes. And I never worked out where you might send them. So those...
How would you know?
I was in Brisbane. It was 1978. There was really no clue about where they might go. So they're now in the Fryer Library at the University of Queensland, and I miraculously got a tax deduction for giving them there. So it's the only money that's ever made me. At the end of typing them, which I think was a spectacular act of parenting to devote all that effort to that, my mother handed me the 3 copies and a book on how to teach yourself to touch type. So I learned to do my own typing after that, and that was the only time someone's ever typed a book for me.
So there was a typewriter in the house?
There was a typewriter in the house.
Like a manual?
A manual typewriter in the house. Yeah.
Oh, the old carriage.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
No, it was steam driven. It was early 20th century. No, this is like... Yeah.
So that was 1878, right?
It was. Round about the invention of the typewriter. Yeah.
And so your second unpublished novel was 1983.
Yes.
And how did you do that one?
I used the spectacular Apple IIe, and I believe I used a word processing package called Zardax.
Zardax,
which sounds
like a Sean Connery movie from the 70s.
Yes. That or some kind of creepy wizard in a kid's animation now.
Zardax.
But yes, Zardoz was the thing that in early 70s, wasn't it? Yeah. So Zardax, I'm sure they got the name from that. Yes. So Zardax, cross between Zardoz and Xanax, and so was the novel, really. But that didn't go anywhere. So I wrote that using Zardax. Has anyone heard of Zardax? No, it's just me and my dad. There was no one using it. People weren't using those. Anyway, Dad got Zardax, which has long been outmoded. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia entry, I don't think. It's so niche. But I think it appears in some others because I've looked for it. I was reading, about George R.R. Martin using WordStar 4 to write Game of Thrones from 1987 and saying, if WordStar 4 packs it in and no one can fix it for me, I'm just finishing and this won't end. So there are millions of people praying that WordStar 4 will hold together. Fortunately, no one's praying for Zardax because it's long gone. And my novel took up 4 floppy disks of the originally floppy disks.
The big ones,
that's right. So I backed it up and stuff, and
What about the early published novels like Passion or Zigzag Street, 92 and 96 they came out?
Written on second-hand apples from Dad, but then sent in the usual way so that they were printed on at least on a daisy wheel printer to start with, but then on a less daisy wheelish printer. So I was so relieved when technology got to a point where I didn't have to pull the edges off my books anymore. So yes, got past the daisy wheel printer.
Because it had the strip down the side.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
That's called a daisy wheel printer. You wouldn't know that.
Dot matrix.
Okay, you remember dot matrix. That's good.
Matrix.
This is good. He's trying to communicate with an older person. It's lovely, isn't it? Yes. So then I would then take it and photocopy it, and I would then send it off the way everyone had done for the preceding 300 or 400 years in an
email attachment.
I would yes, in the previous version of an email attachment, which is called a parcel. And it would go on a motor vehicle.
Were they carried by pigeons?
No, very strong pigeons, one page at a time. So I mailed those off and waited for a response by telephone. And it didn't happen in my pocket in those days.
It was a home phone. It was
fixed, yes. Rotary dial. Yes, that's good, yes. 2 pieces, of course. 2 pieces in a walnut box. Yeah.
Did you have the internet for either of those two?
Oh, the internet.
96.
When did they arrive
Zigzag
in my
Street.
life?
Would you have had the internet then?
I actually got the internet. Jeez.
You bought it. Yeah. You bought the internet around about 1995.
I bought one of those internets just after that. With the Zigzag Street money, I bought myself an internet. And so I had it after that. But I used it just for the email and not much else because it was very slow because it was dial-up. So I had dial-up, and dial-up you really had to want to go to a website to use dial-up and actually, do that. So I knew about that from my dad, but I hadn't. I just thought it was Dad's crank hobby, and then suddenly, it's how the world works. So I had to get on board. So
So for I think the next few novels like Bachelor Kisses, Thompson Gunner, Perfect Skin, 98, 99, 2000, you didn't send those by email? No one would have had an email, would they? I suppose people would have had an email.
I got an email address in 1997 when it was becoming less exotic. But I didn't send things by email because publishers weren't up to that then.
Right.
It was like, no, you haven't really sent it to me until I've got that manuscript thumping on my desk. So I would still send things on paper. And what it did, what that technology did for me was that it meant that I could have agents and publishers in Sydney, Melbourne, London and New York and be in regular contact with them at no cost.
Yeah.
And so it suddenly actually radically changed my job, not in a way that looks primitive now, but that actually meant that I could start networking globally and be in regular contact with people anyway. So it was very valuable, but I didn't realize what was ahead.
What about things like the author's tools, like a dictionary, for example? I mean, I still have a big, huge dictionary on my desk.
Yes.
Because I just love referring to it, the new Shorter Oxford Dictionary. But at what point did you make your transition from dictionary to getting the software to do it?
Well, there's no hurry with that. So I've got, under my desk, I've got a thing. You're looking at me with abject horror. It's sort of built into things now, isn't it? I don't have to. Anyway, my grandparents in the 60s collected issues of a magazine that were able to be bound together into a thing called Purnell's New English Encyclopedia and Dictionary. Right. And I've still got the dictionary and I keep it because it's just so amusingly old. So if I actually want a dictionary, I actually look things up in that. But obviously I just go online and look things up. No, I don't actually have. I don't like have an app or anything. Should I?
No. But I mean, more in terms of the sort of. If you're doing research, for example, as an author, I mean, everyone would now a lot of people now do the research on the internet. Yes. Obviously.
Yes, but I'm one of those people.
At some point you didn't.
At some point I didn't. And I made I got a broadband connection. That started to make things really change. Before then, World of Chickens was, I think, one of the last times I didn't have a broadband connection, and there were still factual errors that we were picking up late on in the process there because I didn't have enough speed to actually check them. So there's a bit in World of Chickens where Frank, Phil's best friend, Frank is kind of awful. He's a kind of Brian Brightman character in that novel, and he wanted to record a song and kind of loop the song and make that the song that to which he would persuade women to have sex with him, and then they would play this song. And I was going to go for Peter Gabriel's "In Your Eyes," but it was actually released several months after the novel is set. The year was right, so I thought it was right, but my editor discovered it was actually too late for the novel, and she said, we've got to change this. So she ended up suggesting the song that's in the novel, and I can't even. It's a song by Heart, which was a great substitution, but I can't even remember the song because it wasn't my idea. That would never happen now. No. The moment a song would cross my mind, I'd be online and I'd be wasting loads of time having lots of fun working out a million things that had no relevance to the novel, but I'd be a total expert and indeed bore on the history of the song by the end of the day. Then I realized I could do more than that, and I think the next big shift for me was when I realized I could use Google Earth and Google Street View, and I was writing Welcome to Normal, or thinking about the idea of that, and I thought, this is a chance to really use technology to build the world of the story, right, and to go to places that I have never been and may never go, and to actually spend a long period of time seeing the minute details that you can only see if you're there. There are a number of stories that are written there after driving the streets the same day as the Google Earth car and seeing what was on the billboards and working out what I could do with that detail and how that could cue something I wanted to reveal. And I really love doing that. And there are places that I haven't been to that I remember more vividly than places I have, because I spent 2 weeks looking at them and driving step by step along the streets on Google Earth. So
it's amazing how careers changed over the years for them. Thank you all very much for coming, and could you please thank tonight's guest, Mr. Nick Earls.
Thank you. Thank you.